All right. Well, good morning and welcome to our monthly webinar series. This month we are talking about retirement ready or not. I'm Scott Moffitt, President and CEO of Summit Financial Group, and with me, as always, is Max Ripperger, who is also an advisor here at Summit. Many of you that are my clients know Max and work with Max on the regular, and Brittany Rogerson, who is our Business Development Director. She's always the one putting these things together, making us look as good as she possibly can. So we are fortunately doing this from our climate-controlled offices here in Loveland and not outside in the 100-degree weather, which is kind of nice. Sorry about that. That's my reminder saying that I've got a webinar coming up here today. All right, so retirement ready or not. Basically, that's our branded name, if you will, for retirement projections, retirement analysis. And this is something that if you're one of our clients, it's quite likely that you've had a retirement projection done. But what shocks me, amazes me, is how many people that I speak with on the regular that do not have a retirement projection or have not had one done, or if so, it was very very high level and maybe a long time ago. And this is kind of your it's kind of your financial physical, if you will. It's the opportunity to see if you're on the right trajectory towards what your goals and objectives are for retirement. I think there are some reasons why people don't have these done, and those are some things that I want to make sure we address today before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts how a retirement projection works. But first and foremost, I think some people are afraid of what the answers are going to be, right? It's kind of like, hey, I don't ever go to the doctor because I'm afraid I might get bad news. Well, the bad news is not created by going to the doctor. The bad news might already be there, right? And so the only benefit or the benefit of going to the doctor is to identify what the problems might be so that we can take corrective measures, corrective actions, whether that's a prescription or a different medication or a change in lifestyle, so that whatever that issue is doesn't become a bigger problem. Well, that is exactly the same thing with a retirement projection. You may not like the information, but armed with that information and armed with the ideas that we can make some changes to improve the situation is only going to be that much more effective the sooner we address the issue. I use the analogy all the time. I've used it for many years that, if you get in a plane, from Ohio, from Cincinnati, to fly to Los Angeles, right? We know we're going west. And as we take off, generally, we know we got to be going west. That's the right general direction. But as we get further and further away and closer to our ultimate destination, those coordinates need to be really dialed in, right? We can, when we first take off, we can be off course a little bit. We've got plenty of time to make adjustments. But as we get closer and closer to that airport, to where we're starting to land the plane, there's no margin of error. We have to be spot on. So course correction has to happen on the regular the closer we get to our destination. So take that to retirement projection. So as we, if we're, like Max's young age in his early 20s, right? He knows right now, just save what he can, put in the right places. And that's probably a really good start. But, and then we get to, Brittany's age, who's just a slightly bit older than Max. Well, now we might want to start dialing in a little bit more of, hey, what at that age we're thinking about retirement. What does that lifestyle maybe start to look like? So we start to kind of frame that in just a little bit. And then we get to, my age where, okay, now it's not that far off as a possibility. We need to really start looking at that and making sure, hey, is the lifestyle that we'd like to have 10, 12 years from now commensurate with the assets that we have, and more specifically with the income that we can generate from those assets? What does Social Security look like? Are we going to work part-time? And as we get closer, we have to start looking at that on the regular. So what all that means is if you're in your 20s or 30s, by all means, you need to have a retirement projection done. And they're not that expensive and it's not that involved, right? But now as we get into our 30s and 40s, we should have it done every few years, every handful of years, just to make sure we're still on course. But then when we start getting into our 50s, this is something we should do every single year. We should update this thing all the time. Now, there are all kinds of retirement projections out there. I'm sure there are some that you can do yourself, but obviously our opinion, our thought is that having this done by financial professionals is the right way to have it done. Doesn't mean that you have to obligate yourself to working with somebody long term. Doesn't mean that you've got to shell out, huge amounts of money to get this done. But have a financial professional run an analysis for you so that you have an idea of where you are and what, if any, changes you might need to make so that you can determine whether or not you are ready for retirement when you want to retire. So that's kind of my rambling, my preamble, if you will. The software system that we actually have just recently moved to is called Money Guide Pro. It has a lot of features to it. It has a very robust computing ability, if you will, to analyze various scenarios for retirement. We tend to keep it more on the basic side. We tend not to drill too deep with this because we just don't think that we really need to in that many cases. So what we're going to do today is kind of just run you through a general overview of what this looks like, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about it on the backside. So Brittany, if you can just kind of pop up I think it's the third slide, maybe the needs and wants slide.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so first thing we want to talk about is, what are our goals when we talk about a retirement lifestyle plan, right? And I'm amazed at how often people have never really stopped to really think about this stuff. But these are great conversations to be having, kind of that, hey, when we get to retirement, what does this look like? Are we going to stay in the same home? Are we going to want to continue to have newer cars? Are we going to want to buy a new car every few years? How much are we going to travel? Are we going to travel more? Are we going to travel internationally? What about college expenses? Will we possibly still have kids maybe in college? Do we want to consider helping grandchildren with college? Are we going to want to help out our adult children in some form or fashion from a monetary perspective? Are we going to join a country club? Are we going to eat out on the regular? These are all great questions and conversation points that you should be having to identify what retirement is going to look like. And from that, there are really some different categories that we identify here. So our needs, right? These are our basic things, right? We need housing, we need healthcare, certain fundamental things that we've just got to have in retirement that we must plan on. The wants, these are things that we say, okay, listen, we want to have a nice retirement and we want to be able to travel. We want to be able to continue to have a nice car. Again, whatever it is for you, it's fine, but we need to identify those. And then there are our wishes. We wish that we could gift money to our kids to help them. We wish that we could take, a family trip and pay it for everybody to take a big trip every few years. Great. Let's identify those things. Let's put those things into our plan. And when we do that, Brittany, if you want to go to the next slide for me, what we have is essentially we're going to start identifying the monetary costs, if you will, with that, right? So when we look at our living expenses, so in this particular example, we've got Ross and Kate. Ross and Kate are going to retire ideally when they are 65, okay? So retiring at 65 for them, that's in the years 2030. If they're both retired, they want to have income of $78,600. That's their basic living expenses. Then we've got a healthcare expense. You see, both of those are very high up on the needs situation. For them, they need to have transportation, so that would be an SUV. That's going to be a $30,000 expense every 4 years. All right. And then for them, they have their wants, which is a travel fund at retirement. So they've got $15,000 a year. And a lot of times people will ask the question, Scott, we penciled in $15,000 a year. Is that too much? Is that not enough? It's your vacation, right? This is your want. So start with whatever it is that you think you want. We'll run that in the plan, and then we'll make the determination as to whether or not that is a doable plan. Part of their wants is a second vehicle that Kate would have. The cost of that is $25,000, happening every 7 years. So they've got one primary vehicle that they're going to replace more frequently, their secondary vehicle. And then you can see that they would love to be able to gift $10,000 a year to their son. Great basic layout here. Okay, now there's a little bit more involved, I would say, in that first level where we've got our age and living expenses. And what I typically suggest when we're first doing this and we're identifying the monthly budget, if you will, or the annual budget, is to take a look at what you currently have right now. So again, if we were to use Cindy and I, and we were to look at our monthly budget, right? So I'm 54, Cindy's 53. And with that, we're going to look at what we're spending on a monthly basis. Now, the reality of it is that we still have children at home. So we're going to strip out those expenses. For some of you, it may be that you're going to have a mortgage payment, or maybe the mortgage will be paid off at that point in time. So that's something you can determine whether you're going to have that or not have that. But for us, we know where we like to travel. We know approximately how often we like traveling and what that expense would be. So really, we're going to strip out the costs associated with the kids, right, as a need, because God willing, when we get to retirement, they're not going to still be living with us and on our payroll, and so we don't have that as an expense. So we strip those things out. Now, for some people, maybe we add in a little bit more than for, okay, we don't have the kids, but now maybe we'd like to travel 2 or 3 more times per year, or maybe we're going to increase our healthcare costs. And that's another big one too, is, what is your healthcare option, particularly if you're looking to retire before age 65. Something we have to factor in is, how are we going to cover our healthcare needs? At 65, we're going to sign up and join Medicare, and that's where our coverage is going to come from. But prior to that, we have to identify that. So let's say it's me, and I'm retiring at 65. And by the way, I'm not retiring at 65. I like what I do. So for those of you thinking that's, what I'm just announcing here, I'm not. I'm just using it as an example. But if I was going to retire, let's say actually at 63, well, given that situation, I would have 2 years of healthcare expense that I would need to cover from 63 to 65 for both myself and for Cindy. So there's a couple of ways we look at that. Either we impute into our plan an annual cost, call it $15,000 a year for 2 years for healthcare coverage for both of us, or I know in my plan that from 63 to 65, I have to do some kind of work that provides me health care and get that coverage. All right. So we don't necessarily have to identify how we're going to do it. We just have to recognize that that is a need in our plan by retiring early, right? So a lot of times people may shy away from retiring early because of that expense. But my suggestion would be, if you really want to retire earlier, simply put the cost of the healthcare into the plan and then determine whether or not it's feasible, whether or not it works, right? And if it doesn't, then we adjust. So that's kind of how we build that budget in level one, if you will. All right, so let's go ahead now. Let's look now that Kate and Ross have their inputs here. Let's look at what the outcome is from that. All right, so what we see under the current scenario is that there is a 59% confidence score, if you will, in their plan. So basically, this says, hey, we're based on what you currently have, right? Current assets, current portfolio value, excuse me, is $970,000. All right. So based on that, we're not overly confident that you're going to be successful with this plan. So what options do we have here? Well, there are a number of different scenarios that we can adjust from this situation. Option one, spend less. Option two, retire later. Option three, save more. Option four, take more risk, get a higher rate of return. Option five, a combination of all of those, right? So really, this is a customized situation. This is a customized plan. In our current scenario here, what we suggested to Ross and Kate in this hypothetical situation was that if we, and you can see in the right column, middle of the PowerPoint, if we decreased our total spending by 4%. So a 4% cut is not really a significant cut, okay? But a 4% decrease in spending takes our confidence zone up to 82%. So there's an 82% chance that based on this scenario, that we're going to be able to fund and afford all goals. That's pretty good. That's really very solid. Okay. And let me also make a comment on retirement projections as a whole. And I think this is an important scenario as well, or important point to make. When we talk about the fact that there's a retirement expense that we have, there's an annual budget that we have, and we want to retire at 65, and we've got money factored in for vacations and for trips and for going out and things of that nature. That's great. And these retirement projections will take that amount and they will increase that year over year by our stated inflation rate. So you can see here, bottom line, inflation that we're using is 3%, probably a fair number. Anywhere between 2.5% and 3% right now, I think is a pretty reasonable number to use, okay? So if we're spending $75,000 in 2024, that means in 2025, that is going to increase from $75,000. We're going to add 3% to that, which is about $2,400. So now we're spending closer to $78,000, right? And then that's going to happen in 2026 and 2027 and so on. Here's the point I want to make. So at some point in time, we retire at 65, we're active, we're healthy, we're going, we're doing, we're traveling, we're going out, we're doing all this stuff. And God willing, at 75, we're still doing those same things. But at some point, that stuff's going to slow. Right? At some point, we just may not travel as much because, maybe health issues, maybe mobility issues. Maybe we just don't want to be away from the doctor. Maybe it's just harder to travel. We just don't want to do it any longer, right? At some point, we're going to slow down and not do as many things. And when that happens, it's quite likely that we won't spend as much money. But yet in our projections, we're kind of assuming for the most part that those numbers are continuing to go up, when in reality, they'll likely level off and maybe go down a little bit. Okay, so when we see, back to our scenario here, this 82% confidence, that number is actually really good because we're assuming we're going to continue to spend a lot of money for a relatively long period of time, when in actuality that is not always going to be the case. Okay, so let's go back then, or let's go to the next slide, Brittany, if you don't mind. And this is where we have the ability to kind of just play around with this, right? So we can make some adjustments. We can look at different scenarios with your expenses, needs, wants, and wishes. We can look at timing of things. So a lot of times too, we have to look at the timing and sequencing of when we take things. So for example, do we take Social Security early? If we're retiring early, do we take Social Security early? Or do we wait on Social Security? Do we use other investments during that period of time and delay Social Security, or vice versa? So these are all scenarios that we can play with and determine if there is a better sequencing of using our assets that increases our success rate. Okay. And one of the things that we like to do, once we've done this analysis for you initially, we want you to come back to us with different thoughts, right? So, for example, we want you to come back and say, hey, what if we retire at 65, but instead of just completely retiring, we want to work a part-time job making $30,000 a year for the next 3 years. And when we do that, Max, if a client calls with a scenario like that, how difficult is it for you to make those changes?
Not difficult at all. We would just go in, edit it, and there's a place where we can add that part-time job for, one person or all that person, and then their expected yearly or monthly income, and then it updates the whole plan.
So it'll immediately update the success rate, correct? Or the
Right, correct.
probability, there we go, of success by making those changes, correct?
Right.
And the same thing, correct me if I'm wrong, but the same thing holds true on the expenses and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's correct.
The other side of this too is we start to talk about the investment. So if, and particularly if we're managing your money and managing your portfolio, we start to talk about the timing and sequencing of the different investments that we have and how they are going to work to help achieve and deliver this plan successfully, right? So those are the things that we will make adjustments once we do this initial plan. So the other thing with this, and what we really like to look at with this playground area, if you will, is kind of a stress test, right? So we want to test this to failure, right? It's just like anything else. When you're testing the viability of it, you're testing how good is it. Let's see how far we can go. Let's stress this thing. So if your thoughts are you want to retire at 67, well, let's just see what 65 looks like. You think you want to retire an $80,000 a year. Well, let's see what 90,000 looks like. Let's see how far we can push this thing. Not that we're going to, but let's just see what we have available with the plan that we've got. I also love, I just used the example, the idea of the part-time job, and I've probably talked with a lot of you that are my clients about this, but the reality of it is, we don't have to look at retirement as just a one point in time transition. We can phase ourselves into retirement. I have a number of clients that maybe they quit their primary job in their early to mid 60s, and then they transition to something that's maybe less stress, maybe less hours, maybe less physically or mentally demanding, but they do something else for a few years that they enjoy doing. And to be able to show the impact of what that looks like in the retirement projection, the retirement ready or not scenario is really very powerful. So identifying part of this retirement plan as, are we going to phase ourselves into retirement? That's something I think is a conversation worth having. Okay, let's move on down, Brittany, as we kind of wrap this up a little bit. So let me move here with you. Okay. So again, this slide just kind of showing different scenarios. And if we have just our needs versus our needs and our wants, and our needs and our wants and wishes, these things get adjusted. One of the nice things about these types of plans is it's a living plan. So as Max alluded to this, we make changes to it and then it recalculates everything. Well, even as we move into retirement, it's not like once we reach retirement, this plan goes away. No, maybe some of our wishes are later on in our retirement scenario. And as we make adjustments, we make we make those adjustments to the plan to determine, okay, maybe these wishes were something that we weren't sure we were going to be able to accomplish, but now, what used to be a 67% probability of success is now an 85 probability of success because of just what's happened in the market since we retired and where we are today. Now we can go ahead and do those things. But again, we're not doing them blindly. We're doing them with the data and the knowledge that we have in front of us. So again, we're making informed decisions, and we're not putting ourselves in jeopardy because we didn't know the consequences of the decisions that we were making. Okay, can we move on down to the next one? All right. So here's what it is. Can I fund my goals without running out of money, right? That's really what we're talking about. People sometimes will joke and say, I want to spend my last dollar as I take my last breath, right? Well, the reality of it is since we don't know when our last breath is, it's a real difficult way of planning. But what we want to be able to do for sure is we want to be able to live our lives the way that we want to, comfortably, doing the things that we've worked all these years to be able to do, and to be able to do so without the worry and the fear that this may come to an end, right? Without the worry and concern that I may have to radically change what I'm doing. I may have to move in with my kids or something of that drastic nature. We don't want to be in that situation. And step one of avoiding those types of things is to get this retirement ready or not projection done. Let's move back or down one more, Brittany, if you will. So this is just kind of a summary of where things kind of add up, right? We end up with an 82% chance of being able to retire successfully without running out of money at 65, with our living expenses covered, our health care. Here's how much we have to travel. Here's how much we have to fund for college. We have a roadmap, right? We have a starting position. We think we're on the right path. And again, this is going to change and this is going to evolve. But, imagine if you're, I don't know, if you're, 45 years of age and you've been working and saving and you think you're doing the right things, but you're just not sure that you're doing the right things. For us to do this analysis for you and to be able to know that, hey, I know we're still probably 20 years out, but man, we are on the right track and we've got time to work on this. We've got time to improve this over the next 20 years. And as we make changes, as we improve things, and we look to be able to adjust that 82 to a 90, or we look to be able to adjust the living expenses from 60,000 to 70,000. We've got that ability and that time to do that. But it starts by having a retirement projection done today. Whatever age you are, it's the right time if you've not had one done. All right, let's go to, I think we've got one final slide. Is that right? All right, so
Just your pretty faces.
our pretty faces. That's so here's the bottom line. If you are a guest on this webinar and you would like to talk to us about having a retirement ready or not analysis done, please give us a call. We'll have that conversation with you. We'll talk with you about what's involved with that. We will talk to you about what we'll need from you in order to get that projection done. And then we can take it from there. If you are a current client and you've not had one done recently, let's get together and let's get that taken care of for you. Happy to do that as always. Brittany, do we have any questions? Do we want to take a couple of questions if we've got any?
Let me open the chat. It's open, so if anybody has any, they can go ahead and drop them in.
While we're waiting to see if anybody has questions, I will go ahead and make the announcement that for July, we are not going to have our monthly webinar. We will resume that back in August. Topic will be announced sometime in the next couple or few weeks. So no webinar in July, but back at it in August.
All right, I think we're good. There's no questions in there.
Okay, great. Well, to all of you that tuned in, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We hope you think enough of our firm to spread the word. And that doesn't mean necessarily to spread the word for people to call in, but even just to join in on these monthly webinars. It gives people an opportunity to meet us kind of on a low-key basis. So we'd love for you to spread the word about these monthly webinars. We thank you for taking time this morning. Stay cool. Enjoy your summer. If you're off traveling and taking vacations, we hope you have a wonderful time. And we certainly hope that you're safe. And we look forward to talking to you sometime in the very near future. Max, Brittany, thanks as always for joining. And we will see you back in August.
Awesome. Have a great day. Thank you.